everyone throughout this great expanse called Earth to WCEG Talk Radio. We are the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group, where we speak life into the community. Our goal is to make you a little bit more informed than you were before you tuned in. Citizens of the world, this is definitely the new WCEG. There is a biblical warning about putting new wine into old bottles. You know about that? Well, that is not the case with us. We will be featuring new content in new formatting. This means that more people will find more to listen to and more ways to access us than before. Today is February 13th, 2023. You are tuned into Issues and Answers with your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. You may subscribe to us free. This is one of the new ways on your YouTube channel by typing in WCEG Network. And that might not be so new, and you may like us and follow and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and my favorite, LinkedIn. In addition, we have new platforms for access to our programming. You may download our free mobile apps for your cell phones. I've got mine. But by going to the Apple Store and search for WCEG Talk Radio for iOS, Apple, iPhones, and iPads. You could even download an app on your Apple Watch. Just search for WCEG Network. And for you Android mobile phone and tablet users, just go to the Google Play Store and search for WCEG Talk Radio. Now let's begin into our programming. I must tell you that the topics and opinions are those of your show host and my guest host, and not the WCEG network. So leave my boss alone. I stand behind all that I say, and so do my guests, believe you me. And we thank you for your continued support. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about my guest today. I have the honor of introducing to you the esteemed Dr. Cassandra L. Wanzo. Now, Dr. Wanzo, let me tell you a little bit about her, just a little bit, because there's not much to tell. Dr. Wanzo received her undergraduate degree from Northwestern University. She completed medical studies at the University of Wisconsin and her psychiatric residency at St. Vincent's Medical Center in New York City. She is a diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology and has served as a member of the American Psychiatric Association's Committee on Religion and Psychiatry. She is a distinguished, I told you I wasn't lying, a distinguished life fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. Dr. Wanzo believes in treating the whole person with dignity, respect, and professionalism. Now, Dr. Wanzo is a highly experienced psychiatrist serving the Atlanta, Georgia area for over 2 decades. I think it's a little bit longer than that. She has been helping individuals struggling with depression, anxiety, stress, women's issues, and lifestyle management. Dr. Wanzo has been frequently quoted as an expert source by a variety of publications such as Upscale Magazine and Heart and Soul Magazine. Dr. Wanzo's column, The Mind, Body, Spirit Connection, is also featured in the Girlfriend's Health Guide magazine. She also has been quoted in the book, Let's All Get High, by Olympic gold medalist Derek Adkins. She is a contributing author to Where Did Our Love Go? Love and Relationships in the African American Community. Dr. Wanzo, this is my correction, he has been a practicing psychiatrist in metropolitan Atlanta for the past 30 years. Yes. Now, she likes to say she began at 2 years old,
right?
but I fact checked and found that she actually started at 5 years old. A real child prodigy. Dr. Wanzo also hosts her own program on the new WCEG, Mind Matters, and sometimes you'll find me there as a guest co-host. This program airs every other Wednesday at 6 p.m. Welcome, Dr. Wanzo.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful, wonderful introduction.
You earned it. You earned it. I didn't have to make it up. Except the part about 5 years. we know it's really 2. Started 6. Ladies and gentlemen, on a serious note, our program today is entitled When Cops Become Murderers, Culture versus Racism. Now, for those of you who follow WCEG, today's program is an outgrowth of Dr. Wanzo's last installment of Mind Matters, which dealt with trauma porn. Briefly, this program dealt with the repeated showings of violent deaths of African Americans at the hands of police officers. Among them are George Floyd of Minneapolis, Minnesota, who was slowly suffocated by a police officer, Derek Chauvin, while other police officers watched. The 2018 murder of Elijah McClain in Aurora, Colorado, by police officers who were so callous that they joyfully returned to the scene of the crime the next day to reenact the event. Tyre Nichols, some call him Tyree Nichols of Memphis, Tennessee, who was beaten to death by 5 Memphis police officers, but committed no crime. In the latter incident, one of the police officers was so proud of what they had done that he took cell phone pictures of the dying man and sent them to 5 friends. How many more such murders go unreported because of lack of video recordings? Now, we know that the repeated display of these videos at some point is not in the public interest, but solely in the interest of providing entertainment for a perverse section of our populace who salivate as they watch young Black men die. If video footage is viewed by the family of the victim, its lawyers, local and federal law enforcement, to whose interest is it to show these videos dozens of times per day? This is trauma porn. The adverse effects are that they reinforce a jaundiced view of African Americans as violent people. And most importantly, it traumatizes a large segment of minorities and African Americans that results in a paralyzing fear and distrust of government and the law. For many years, I have averred that more than the racist problem, we have a cultural problem in policing. This can be no more evident than what occurred in Memphis, Tennessee, in the murder of Tyre Nichols. The predominant offenders were African American police officers, but they were assisted in an attempted cover-up by some white first responders. That's a culture. Already, I have received criticism for calling certain police officers murderers. Viewers and listeners, what would you call people who beat and kick a man who was lying on the ground and unable to defend himself? Please, if you're listening to us on Facebook, text in your question, text in your concerns. I really, really want to hear from you. Please give us your opinion on how we deal with this issue that is front and center in our news coverages almost every week. And before I stop here, just let me add that it's important to note that I did not make the mistake of many and included the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Trayvon Martin. Those murders were committed by civilians acting as vigilantes and not police officers. Dr. Wanzo, it's rough out here. One thing I'd like to ask is, do we have a mental health issue, possibly gravitating into something like mob mentality?
I mean, in terms of the police officers themselves?
Yes.
Based on what you're saying, there's a certain amount of sadistic thinking and behavior. So to me, that points to some type of underlying personality characteristics, and maybe some of the officers gravitated to the field because they can exercise their power, the need for power and control. So I would be concerned about what screening tools are used to, assess officers prior to becoming. It sounds like that needs to be sharpened up or changed, because some of these officers sound like they have, like I said, sadistic tendencies and need to control things. And so those officers there needs to be a better screening tool or psychological evaluation, I think, for the field, because yes, it sounds like severe personality issues.
And one of the things that I would suggest, and I like your input on that, is not only do we need to have psychological testing prior to employment, but perhaps during the course of their employment.
Yes, ongoing. Is there anything like that now, ongoing psychological assessments?
I think in some rare instances, there may be in some police shootings. I'm not 100% sure. I know that during my career there was not, and I'm sure that in some, especially your smaller departments, it probably doesn't happen. I can think of some horror stories. I knew one police officer who killed somebody in the line of duty, justified, but he was out of work due to injuries for about a month and a half. But when he came back to work, he was wearing a "Make My Day" T-shirt.
Oh, wow.
Which I found to be quite unsettling. So I think when we talk about that was definitely a banner for psychological testing. Fortunately, he didn't remain on the job too much longer after that.
And why was that? What happened?
I don't know. He resigned. He wasn't pressured to resign or anything. He just resigned, and I don't know whether it's because of the trauma of the shooting. Having been involved in actually 2 shootings in my career, not so much the second, but definitely the third, I was slightly traumatized by it, by the entire incident, and believe me, I was upset for quite a while by it. I mean,
Speaking of that, it would seem like after such an incident that there should be some type of debriefing.
Yes.
Right. So does that?
Yes. No.
Wow.
Nothing. If you call being interviewed by perhaps homicide detectives, if it gravitates to homicide, or shooting team. Some states have shooting teams, or internal affairs. No, and a lot of that is a lot of that questioning. It evolves around protecting the assets of the city, not necessarily protecting the public or the officer's mental health. The city wants to make sure that it doesn't get sued by whatever action. But I just think it's a concern when you see things like what happened to Mr. Anthony Lowe in Los Angeles last week, where he was a double amputee, armed with a knife, but again, a double amputee who was on his stubs attempting to get away from police, and they shot and killed him. I think they hit him 10 times with bullets. He was struck 10 times.
That's inhumane.
It's inhumane. And I have personally been involved in an incident in my rookie year where we confronted a domestic disturbance with a mentally ill man who was armed with a butcher knife. And there were several police officers there. We were able to disarm this man by distracting him momentarily. He wasn't seriously hurt. No police officers were hurt. Not a weapon was drawn. Not a weapon was drawn. It was all done by conversation and distraction.
Okay.
And I don't know why these de-escalating techniques aren't utilized.
Are they taught de-escalate?
Well, if they may be taught, but they're not taken seriously.
Okay.
The conversations will go sometimes like this. Okay, guys, we have to have this talk. This is a training. We have to have this talk. I know some of you might not agree, but please just bear with me. These are the type of things we have to talk about. And this subject is de-escalation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the tone.
Mm-hmm.
So the officers or those being trained take the cue from the trainer that, okay, I'm listening to this, but I don't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you're confronted with these situations in real life, you do basically what you were trained to do, which is to react violently. Because if acting civilly and sensibly is ridiculed, then you're going to act the other way.
Wow.
And that's the problem we have.
And I suppose they don't include any kind of diversity training or training unconscious bias or anything like that. I assume they don't do anything like that either.
None. One of the things that and I speak about in my book is that during in my second year there was a confrontation with some people, a group of people in Germantown who were engaged in some sort of disturbance, and I was the only African American officer there, and the other people, the subjects of the investigation at the time were all African American, and the subjects were upset and angry, and they were using profanity. And they directed some of that profanity towards the police officers. But it's when you know what you're dealing with, that type of direction is no more than using a profane word as a pronoun. It's not a threat, you know? And these officers became upset that they were being called out of their name by these people. And I had to intercede and say, wait a minute, just calm down, you know, and sort of de-escalated the situation was de-escalated, and everybody went on their way. But that was eye-opening to me that with some people who have not been exposed to or given diverse training around people of other cultures, that they always feel threatened,
exactly,
and feel the need to react violently at the slightest provocation.
Right, the us versus them.
Yeah. Well, you're actually that us versus them is part of your training, subtle as it may be, but when you go to your first fraternal order police meeting, the first thing you hear is, "We're all blue."
So it's amplified with the culture, the us
Correct.
versus amplified.
Correct.
Okay.
And then as a new police officer, it's also pounded into you. And the example I might have used on your program that happens, and the public needs to be aware of this, where you come on the job with the greatest of intentions, and you're put on a detail, as we had for the civil disturbances in Atlanta, and you're a Black police officer, and you have Black people walking up to you and spitting you in the face. So, and calling you names. So what happens when you get away from that situation, the other police officers who are not African American will say to you, "See, this is how they look at you. They don't look at you as a Black man. They look at you as a man in blue. You're one of us." And that's reinforced. So those things actually happen. Those things happened in my career, especially during my rookie career, the rookie portion of my career. But Those things, if they become ingrained in you when you're a young police officer, if you're not strong and intelligent, they tend to stay with you throughout your career unless you receive some sort of intervention.
For example, the 5 officers in Memphis being African American. Well, the first 5 that they.
Yeah, and I think that stands out to make my point that I've been trying to make for years, that it's not just racism, it's a culture. It's a culture. I know in my old city, sometimes the worst thing you want to see coming into your neighborhood, where we have a unit, a specialized anti-crime unit called the Highway Patrol, and they had some other names before that. But anyway, the worst thing was to see a Black officer in their stormtrooper outfits, because that's what they wear, come and be confronted by one of these officers, because it was nothing for them to take an innocent person and start slapping them around, especially if you were African American.
The Black officers doing it.
Oh, absolutely, because they were making points for their white coworkers. They wanted to say, "Hey, I'm just like you. You can trust me." So what happens is you have for the people that you look to see, okay, this is my kinsman who understands me. This is the person that you're looking at, and it's not, because he's been indoctrinated. That officer's been indoctrinated to look at you as a non-person, as a thing, and not as a human individual, but in particularly a African American or Hispanic kinsman. You are just nothing more at that time than a tool for them to show their allegiance to a particular group. And this is what you see in Memphis, Tennessee, which was absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible. I don't know any other way to explain it. This poor man, no doubt, I think he might have run. In this case, he had a good reason for running. But even that running, even if he ran and was caught, the beating that he took, totally uncalled for.
But do you think that was part of the fact, this power thing, the fact that he ran, got away, that he ran and got away, so they were taking out even more anger, the fact that he had the nerve to run and from me and exercising their power because he ran.
Yeah. I only revert back to my own career, and I've run down many people. But I was known for the fact that I was a little fleet of foot and could catch people. But
did you find anger building up because they were running?
The joy for me was capturing the person.
Okay.
I can remember chasing one guy, and I was singing to him as I was running after him.
Singing?
Singing to him, yes.
What were you singing?
I was singing, "I'm gonna catch you." And I caught him. I mean, and once caught and handcuffed, that's it for me.
But you didn't feel yourself personally getting angry, because I'm thinking some of these guys were taking it personally, and their anger, exacerbated, in the situation, because they're taking it personally.
Well, they did. Who were you to run away from me? Exactly. I told you to stop.
Right.
Well, these were guys known for, and I'm talking about Memphis, Tennessee. These were guys, they were in unmarked cars. They were known for, and I'm not sure what happened in this incident, but they were known to ride around with ski mask on. So you have someone approaches you in civilian clothes, in an unmarked car. What are you supposed to do? Survival skills kick in. You may yell police, but you don't look like police to me.
Wow.
And who wouldn't run? And I direct this to my white viewers and listeners under the same circumstances. Would you stand there if 5 men got out of their cars and said, "Stop, we're the police,"
Oh,
and
no.
they're not in uniform?
Mm-mm.
Would you stand there?
I would think there's some people trying to rob me, some thugs trying to rob me.
Well, I worked in an undercover
Mm,
for my last couple of years on the police department. And one of the things that was drilled into us was that if we see suspicious vehicles, we were not to take any action. We were to call for a uniformed
mhm,
police vehicle to come to our location,
mm,
give them all the information, and have them stop the vehicle and then further conduct our investigation. You were
mm,
always told to have a uniformed officer in a uniformed marked vehicle present,
mm,
even when we did search warrants.
mm. But what
It
about
was
you as a ordinary citizen? If you're seeing something like this, unmarked cars, the guys masked, what are you supposed to do as an individual citizen?
it's a scary
Mm,
situation. Uh, I think your survival skills kick in.
mm,
I mean, and this is going to have to go back to um, police departments are
mhm,
going to have to reevaluate
mhm,
how they deploy and what and the degree of authority
mhm,
they give plainclothes officers to stop
mhm,
and investigate civilians.
mhm,
When you have no other identification than a tiny little badge that some people can't see when you put it out of your pocket because you're standing several feet away from them, what needs to happen? There has to be a change in the way non-uniformed police officers confront civilians.
Because I would think person that's a carjacking or anybody like Herschel Walker can get any kind of badge any place,
Yes, exactly. I
right?
mean, and believe me, there are Herschel Walkers out there.
Mhm,
Trust me, they
mm,
are. You have security guards. You have fired police officers.
mm,
It's easy to get fake badges. I mean,
mm,
you can get them anywhere.
mm,
So, yeah, it's an issue.
mm.
Again, going back to there should be, unless it is a most violent incident where there's a possible loss of life involved, there should be few incidents where, as a plainclothes police officer, you should be confronting civilians.
So this
They
unit,
should be few.
what was this unit in Memphis called again? They were.
It was called the Scorpion Squad.
So why is that kind of squad involved in a traffic stop?
Shouldn't be.
Uh,
Shouldn't be.
mm.
Do you know at plainclothes how many traffic violations I saw? I mean, you see them all the time. There is no reason. And if you feel there is a reason, you use your radios. You should have a radio to contact uniformed police to have them make the stop for you. But to actually go after and pursue and stop a civilian, absolutely not.
Do we know to this day the supposed reason that they stopped Tyree Nichols for? Do we know?
Uh, I, I I I think there was a reason cited. I don't recall it right now.
Mm,
But again, it wasn't because a violent crime had been committed.
mhm,
It wasn't because there was a potential of a violent crime to be about to be committed. Uh, because this man was unarmed. He wasn't selling drugs.
mhm,
He he wasn't doing anything that warranted him being murdered.
mhm,
And this is the problem. And I was hoping that we could get some input from from the public on this program. particularly via those who can contact us via Facebook, because this is a serious issue. It's a very serious issue, and I'll give you another example. In my home city of Philadelphia, in October of 2016, this is the most under publicized police shooting ever. 9 police officers fired 102 9mm bullets at Christopher Sowell. He was an unarmed man. He was hit 92 times. Police Commissioner Ross excused this as contagious fire. I'll talk about that in a minute. Now, how many hits from a 9mm round does it take to disable a man attempting to raise his hands?
Probably one.
1, 2 at the most.
Mm-hmm.
A 9mm round striking a human being does monstrous damage. Trust me, especially if you hit, as police officers are trained, to aim for what we call the K5 zone, which is anywhere in the torso. So if you get hit anywhere, that bullet is like getting hit with a sledgehammer. So that's going to knock you down. If not the first one, certainly the second one. He was hit, he was shot while he was on the ground 92 times.
Why?
And they said contagious fire. And contagious fire is a phenomenon that occurs when one officer shoots, causing other officers who have a proclivity to also shoot, even if they are unaware of the justification for the shooting. In other words, they see one cop shooting at somebody, so they say, okay, well, let's all join in.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I've never heard that term. That's
yeah, and that's,
contagious fire. Okay.
This is mob mentality on steroids. Now, is it negligence or is it murder?
Wow.
We can't, with intelligent reason, call this justifiable. But that was one that has gone under the radar and nobody talks about.
So what happened? What was the inciting incident? I mean, what happened?
Well, there was a prior incident with this Christopher Sowell, where he was he may have been intoxicated, but he was involved in a domestic incident where I believe he stabbed or cut his a male or female in a residence, and he also cut a young girl. It may have been his daughter, but I know it was a young girl. I think she was about 11 years old. But when the police came to the scene, he was standing in the middle of the street. And keep in mind, there was no gun involved. So the supposed weapon was a knife. When they saw the man, confronted the man, and he had his hands in his pocket, so they asked him to raise his hands, show his hands. And as he raised his hands, they shot him. He had a cell phone in his hand. And he was shot 92 times.
Wow. I never about that at all.
Yeah, well, I I went to the Philadelphia NAACP and spoke about this. And they, for some reason, weren't interested. And the reason being that Police Commissioner Ross was considered an honored member of the Philadelphia branch of the NAACP, and he was held in high esteem by them. So they didn't want to say anything or do anything that adversely affected this African-American police commissioner. Now, this police commissioner subsequently was drummed out of the job due to his involved in covering up several instances of sexual harassment of female officers. And he had his own personal incident which came to light, and he immediately retired.
Wow.
But
How many
Yeah,
officers were involved in this incident with this guy? So
9.
were they ever brought up individual charges? Did the family have a case? Nothing. And the family, there's no family that sued or wow.
I don't know. We're talking about poor people with limited resources,
Mm,
and a lot of times when these type of stories are suppressed,
mm,
what happens is um, like the attorney Crumps of the world don't hear about these
mm.
cases, and they fall below the radar.
So it was 2016.
2016.
How do you spell his last name? I'm gonna look that up. Yes,
Sowell.
I never heard about that.
His
Wow.
first name is Christopher.
Never heard about that.
And yeah, I can send you the article. I have it. I've saved it on my computer.
Mm,
It's one of the cases that I've never received
mm,
an adequate answer for about why this wasn't
mm.
taken care of. But this is mob mentality on steroids.
So the officers received no disciplinary action.
None,
Oh,
none,
wow.
none to speak of.
Someone said no different than when the LA police, when asked why did they continue to be Rodney King, they replied because he kept getting up. Wow.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly.
Mm,
You know, and there are other incidents. These are the ones that come to light,
mm,
but I can tell you, in my professional opinion, that there are other incidents that happen that don't come to light,
mm,
either because they happen uh, in isolated locations, or they have happened where there were no uh,
mm,
videos, anything like that. Because remember, uh, the incident and with George Floyd,
mm,
where police officer Derek Chauvin sat on his neck
mhm, mhm,
uh, and suffocated him to death, slowly.
mhm,
Uh, he did that as if this was something that he had done on a regular basis.
mhm, mhm,
And that's my point, that when you see people do things with that much facility, it's an indication that this isn't the first time that they've done it.
mhm, mhm,
And he expected no repercussions.
mhm, mhm.
And if you remember, the cover up had already started. But oops, they didn't know about this little girl who had her cell phone out.
Mhm, mhm,
Uh, so, correct, as someone just suggested, what happened to people before body cams and video footage?
mhm,
Um, there are a whole host of things
mhm,
that have happened,
mhm,
and I'm going to cite some incidents. But how do we? What's the resolution?
mhm.
How do we combat that? Uh, I don't know, Doc. Uh,
Aren't there like citizen police boards or something like that? Do those exist?
they do in some cities.
Hmm.
Um, the problem with that is how informed are the citizens,
Mm,
and what evidence is brought before the citizens. And you know, you have unions that are set up that will jump in the way and provide um, attorneys who will try to block
mm,
any type of investigation,
mm,
particularly if the Citizens Review Board, as they're sometimes called, doesn't have subpoena power.
mm.
Uh, and
There what?
that's
Do we have that in Atlanta? Citizens Board, review board?
I think they had it.
Mm,
I'm pretty sure Atlanta had it, but I'm not sure whether they had subpoena power.
mm,
And I mean, the instances where of cases that would go before these boards
mm,
are many, 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 many.
mm.
It's there are many. Um,
And I know
you
that
know,
the qualified immunity exists, and there've been moves
yes,
to try to disband that. So
one of my resolutions. jumping around here a little bit. I did have a couple of questions, but it's never untimely to come up with resolutions. That one of the things I noted in my book is that police officers should not spend in any more than 5 years in any one police district within a city. They should be moved around. And if they're working in an undercover capacity, like these anti-crime teams or Philadelphia's Highway Patrol, there needs to be a limit of 2 years in those assignments.
Okay.
And I should add that we talked about that a psychiatric examinations should be conducted after every police officer involved shooting,
Exactly.
whether they are the shooter or have been the victim of a shooting.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I agree.
In addition, police officers with more than 2 separate complaints of excessive force must receive a mandatory psychological evaluation. And these need to be instances where there are injuries to the victim that require professional or medical treatment. Of course, I'm sure some agencies would find a way to try to get around that last part, but then it's incumbent upon us to get the word out so that people can't be intimidated into not getting the medical treatment that they are required.
Both of those are excellent suggestions. Excellent.
But it's also, Dr. Wanzo, it's why police chiefs, government leaders will not talk to people such as I, because we know where the skeletons are, and we know the administrative workarounds that that police departments will do, that Fraternal Order of Police and police benevolent associations will get their lawyers together and say, well, we can work around this. We know what they do.
Are they unions? Are they considered unions, those 2 organizations you mentioned?
They're not considered unions. They're called bargaining agents. It's a euphemism. It's what they really are. But
Fraternal Order of Police, and what was the other organization?
The Police Benevolent Association. They're the 2 largest organizations. But and what we're talking about is that there are a lot of the problems that we have is officers who are psychologically wounded by being in stressful situations for too long and are too afraid or stigmatized into not receiving mental health counseling. Those are traumatic. I mean, even doctors who see serious trauma, emergency room doctors especially, who see trauma patients, serious traumas day in and day out, at some point, they require.
You're right.
Even people in your profession, at some point, they may require counseling from outside. So who are police officers so different?
You're right. You absolutely
that they don't. And before we go, and I'll get your comments on this, I did a little bit of research here because I hate to come to these discussions unarmed. but I went to pardon the pun. Pardon the pun. But I went to the Walden University website, and they give 5 reasons for mental health. The mental health of police officers needs to be a priority. And I'll just gloss over them before I give you some examples that may get me in trouble. Police officers report higher rates of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. According to the latest law enforcement statistics by the National Alliance of Mental Illness, it's NAMI, Police officers report much higher rates of depression, burnout, and PTSD and anxiety than the general population. In addition, almost 25% of police officers have experienced suicidal ideation at least once in their lifetime. Think about that.
Wow. You know what? In my 30 years of practice, I have never had a police officer as a patient. Wow. So what does that tell you? Either they're not coming to me or they're not coming to treatment at all. But in 30 years, I've never had a police officer. Now, I can't believe that. Not once. Not once.
And I personally know several police officers who committed suicide.
Oh, not once, Norman. 30 years. Not once.
That's strange.
It is.
That's strange. Number two, more police officers die by suicide than in the line of duty. That is amazing. The suicide rate for law enforcement officers is one of the most alarming statistics published by NAMI. Not only do more police officers die by suicide than they do in the line of duty, but this rate increases over 3 times the national average for those serving in the smallest departments. And when compared, yes. And when compared,
repeat that statistic again.
Yes. Not only do more police officers die by suicide than they do in the line of duty, but this rate increases to over 3 times the national average for those serving in the smallest departments.
Wow, why is that?
And when compared with firefighters, the suicide rate for police officers was 4 times higher. Third reason, productivity is negatively affected by poor mental health. Yes. And it goes into a whole series of job functions. And then also, last but not least, the public at large is put at risk. And number 4, most law enforcement officers do not seek care for mental issues. That's why you haven't seen them.
30 years, not one. In 30 years, not one.
America, I hope you're listening. I hope you're listening. 30 years seeing everybody.
And lawyers, teachers, nurses, I mean, everybody, you know, homemakers, but not one police officer. Not one. Wow. I am really dumbfounded. Well, not dumbfounded, I'm just shocked. Wow.
And considering that the number of police officers with mental health issues and 25% of whom have suicidal ideation, that is profound.
So let me ask, do police departments have EAP, employee assistance program?
They do. They do.
They do. Okay.
They do. They do.
Okay.
Yes, and I can say that they have ways of handling situations that are discreet. And usually they have either police officers or former police officers who are involved in that. And they also have medical professionals who are involved in that. But
the employee assistance program. So
yes.
Okay. Most departments, all departments have that, or?
I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know.
Did your department have yes, that?
We did in Philadelphia.
Oh. I'm wondering, do people utilize those services? Obviously not. It doesn't sound like
that's a problem. That's a problem. It says less than 20% of police officers with confirmed mental health issues had sought services in the previous year.
Okay.
There's a gentleman, if I might divert for just a second, that I worked with, and I wrote about him in my book. For the entire 2 or 3 years that I worked with him, it was obvious that this man had mental issues. He wasn't violent, but it was obvious that there was something wrong with this individual. Nothing was done. his behavior was basically laughed off until it got to the point, a couple of years after I left that unit, where it became so bizarre that they, and this is the true story, that they referred him to the Philadelphia. Philadelphia has its own medical department for employees, and the psychiatrist.
The police department has its own medical.
Yeah, the city.
Oh, the city. Oh, the city.
So
okay.
the city psychiatrist interviewed him. This is true. He interviewed him and found him sane enough to go back to work, to carry a gun. Several weeks after that, he was caught. He was on duty on the subways handing out religious literature to people, and he was told not to do this.
It's a police officer.
This is a police officer.
Oh, wow.
And he began to involve himself in other bizarre behavior. So he was committed to a mental health hospital.
Okay.
A week after, this happened around Thanksgiving, a week after he was committed, he died by suicide. He hung himself. At that time, the city psychiatrist medical unit, they went back and revised all their paperwork.
Yes.
Those are the type of things that happen. The fifth instance why officers should receive, we need to take this more seriously, is that despite a lack of treatment, mental illnesses are prevalent among those with law enforcement jobs. Prevalent. This is additionally, mental illness diagnoses are more prevalent among officers with more than 15 years of law enforcement career experiences. And this is what we talked about, how there needs to be periodic examinations of and this is not about firing officers who may have some sort of mental problem at the time. This is about giving them, availing them of treatment and counseling.
Is this something that can be legislated, that legislators can have some input into, or?
It can. It should be. It should be. This is in the public interest.
Because voluntarily they're not going to do it on their own, and there has to be some mandate, some mandate where this is, because what you're saying, those are all excellent. Everything you're saying is excellent, And
let me give you some examples of why mental health evaluation on a periodic basis is necessary. In my book, I talk about when I was a kid, one of the reasons why that I say when I came on the police department, as a youngster, teenager, I saw a man brutally beaten in the middle of the street. His name is A.B. Scott. He was beaten in the middle of the street by police officers. This man walked around with this injury for months. And what this colored my outlook on policing for my entire career, because I would never, ever tolerate anyone to be beaten like that under any circumstance. And unfortunately, that's not the view of many police officers, but I was known to be confrontational about such things. But to tell you, if you think that this is not important, 2 New York City police officers became contract hitmen for the New York Mafia. This is a fact. They were actually involved in killing people
while they were while they were still employed.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Absolutely. Philadelphia, my home city, Black Brothers Incorporated, used an active duty police officer, highway patrol, to not only arrest competitors in the drug market, but also to facilitate the murder of the sole witness of a robbery murder at DuBrow's Furniture Outlet. Philadelphians know exactly what I'm talking about. This resulted in a murder contract being put out on the officer's partner. His name was John D'Amico. He was shot at twice, but he was never injured. There were 2 separate incidents where Philadelphia police officers arrested scores of people, predominantly African Americans, on fake narcotic sales and possession charges. A lot of these people, they weren't just arrested and released. A lot of these people did serious time in jail. And then in my own incident where I uncovered a burglary ring in the Manioc section of Philadelphia, I was persecuted for reporting it and was harassed for a couple of years during my career and several years after my career. And the harassment was so intense that I had to move from Philadelphia and move down to lovely Georgia, where I've never regretted. Los Angeles, California, you had sheriffs working with drug dealers to harass and steal drugs from competitors. All of this is real stuff, and it's people, it's committed by people who are obviously are not psychologically fit to be police officers. And this is why this program is so important. And this is why it's so important for our legislators, not just here in Georgia, not just here in Philadelphia, but everywhere, to take a serious look at what is happening to our police officers before they come on the job and after. You got a double amputee. It's on video.
Do you have any thoughts about how to get these policies instituted?
Well, yeah, number one is there are good cops who want to report this among their coworkers. We call them whistleblowers.
Okay.
But currently they don't have any protection. And several of these officers, this is recent, because I'm involved in the Lamplighters organization, that they are either marginalized, they're fired on trumped up charges, and we are soliciting Congress right now. We're soliciting a bill before Congress that's was submitted by Congressman John Connolly of West Virginia, Virginia, and to protect whistleblowers.
So who's we?
We, the Lamplighters organization.
Oh, the Lamplighters, okay.
And the purpose of being is that this is a public safety and public trust issue. And that when the people who are most knowledgeable about what's going on in their departments and the abuses that are going on in their departments, when those people are not listened to, that's a guarantee that these abuses will continue. So there's so much more to get into with this topic, but I hope that, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Wanzo for helping me out and bringing really a medical and perspective on this topic. I think it's important. I think her input was essential. That's why I wanted her on this program, and that my hope is that this program entitled "When Cops Become Murderers, Culture or Racism," this needs to be taken seriously by everyone. Everyone.
Everything that you've proposed is right on the money. Is really needed. Long overdue. Long overdue.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And I'd like to thank all of you viewers and listeners for tuning in to the absolutely new WCEG, Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Love having you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take care, Doctor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You're welcome.